Apparently, Australia's treatment of single mothers is inhumane. Let's have a look. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Heiser Says. Now, this was shared to me by one of my viewers, and it's a Melbourne mum who went to the United Nations and is saying that we're in breach of human rights because of our treatment of single mothers. Now, I thought we would listen to this Radio National piece together and have a bit of a talk about it because, frankly, it seems a bit offensive. So I'll just start playing this now.
Woman has told the UN that Australia's treatment of single mothers is discriminatory and breaches human rights. Mother of three, Juanita McLaren, addressed the UN Commission on the Status of Women in New York overnight after lodging the first complaint by an Australian under the Convention on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women.
Just think about that there's a convention for to eliminate discrimination against women. Now, we have legislation in place, anti-discrimination laws in place that make it illegal to discriminate against women. Okay? That's done. It's dusted. It's ancient. It exists. So I don't know why this is happening.
Juanita McLaren spoke alongside the Special Rapporteur on Extreme Poverty and Human Rights, Philip Alston, the Australia Council of Social Service CEO Cassandra Goldie, and the Chief Executive of the National Council for Single Mothers and Their Children, Teresa Edwards.
Chief Executive for Single Mothers and their children. Okay, didn't know that organisation exists. A rapporteur is someone who reports from the United Nations back or towards.
Juanita McLaren and Teresa Edwards join me from New York. Juanita McLaren, Teresa Edwards, welcome to RM Breakfast.
Just one thing to consider. How could she afford to go to New York to make this submission? If you're a single mother, if you're getting, single mother's pension, maybe public housing, money's tight and you got to tighten your belt to achieve everything you can. How could she afford to go to New York? Someone tell me. Please let me know in the comments.
Good morning, thank you.
Juanita, can I start with you? What tale did you tell the UN overnight about the treatment of single mothers in Australia?
Well, what I did was go through the example of my own experiences in the last 3 or 4 years since I had to be on parenting payment and then on New Start.
So it's just one person's experiences. It's all about just their own individual lived experience. Where's the statistics? Where's the facts? Where's something beyond emotional response? And the gentleman who sent me this, he's really frustrated that this is happening. But I mean, it's the United Nations. Don't you get a free plane ticket to speak at the UN when you get bullied online? I mean, where's my ticket for all the crap I've copped in the last week? I'd love to go to New York. Be great. I might watch Letterman. Oh, he's gone now, isn't he?
Despite the fact that that I actually work, and the level of control that there is, that I need to continue to apply for jobs even though I have one, to be able to access income support.
So
I'm going to just ask one question here before we continue. Do you think there'll be any talk of why she's a single mother? Do you think there'll be any talk of where the dad is? Why she chose the wrong man or men? And let me know in the comments now before we listen anymore. Do you think all the children are from the one dad or from multiple dads? Place your bets. Place your bets. Because you got to understand there are a lot of single mothers there that are single mothers because of circumstances that are terrible. And there's a lot of them that are due to bad choices. And I somehow think the ones that are going and crying to the UN might be more the whingy type. What do you reckon? Social justice type. Do you reckon she has purple hair? Too bad it's radio.
it was a story about the burden of compliance, yeah?
Yeah, mainly about the burden of compliance. Also about how ineffective the amounts are as well, how the amounts of money are actually not sustainable. And not realistic given the cost of children.
And what is the amount of money? A lot of people probably don't know what the supporting parents benefit is and where it cuts off and where it drops back to.
Well, at the moment, as as a sole parent of 3 sons with 100% care, my New Start entitlement would be $610 a fortnight.
A fortnight?
Mm-hmm.
And is that the full amount, or is that...
What about the other money that she gets from parental support, family tax benefits? Let's hear about that.
less because you do some work as well?
No, that's the full amount when I don't work. So I can earn up to, I think it's about $118 without that amount being reduced. Anything over that, the amount gets reduced.
Okay. Now, that's obviously not a lot of money to live on. In fact,
Why is there no mention of the family tax benefit? Why is there no mention of that?
Some cities you couldn't even rent a place that fits 4 people for that amount of money every week. But I wonder how the UN committee heard your evidence, Juanita, because obviously it deals with, very entrenched disadvantage in developing nations in terms of inequality of women and children in particular. What kind of response did you get?
Oh, well, the actual complaint was put in a while ago,
Yep.
and the correspondence between the UN and the Australian government has already commenced. So the UN agreed with what we were saying and what we presented about the entrenchment of poverty, but our government actually responded sort of saying that it was lacked merit, the complaint. But
Sure.
I would ask...
So she's only talked about New Start. She hasn't talked about the family tax benefit. She hasn't talked about rent assistance. She hasn't talked about access to childcare that she'd receive. I wonder why. I really wonder why.
To read more about that, because she headed up that whole legal side and the language and the authorship of the complaint.
Yeah.
So there you go. She's being used by an advocacy group to make this complaint to get some media exposure. So in some ways, I mean, it's good. We need to talk about this. We need to be aware about it, particularly people who are interested in men's rights and equal rights for everyone. We need to talk about the fact that this is getting attention at the United Nations. This is...
And we used my story as an example to illustrate the policy.
Well, Therese, let's go to you now. What was that? Was there questioning from the committee? Did you get asked questions? What actually happened overnight?
Sure. So it is the first complaint of its type that the UN have accepted. So that's a big landmark moment. So it's just not ours.
So just one thing I need to add here, because this is the first complaint, and one of the logical fallacies that you always hear in arguments is this concern at the slippery slope. Giving a little will not lead to more. And the more I'm looking at politics and what's going on, the more issues I have with that. Because I think when you give something or when you make one step, it emboldens people to go further, and it's a sign of weakness. Psychologically, I think that's what people see. And I think that's what we're seeing here. This is the first step, and they're going to be pushing for more. They'll be lobbying the UN that Australia is so horrific to women. Still no mention of the father, though, is there?
In Australia, who are up close and personal, who have seen the horrors of cuts that keep hitting our lowest and poorest families, which are often single mother families. So for the UN to accept it is quite significant, and for them to then write to the Australian government with a bit of an explanation what's going on here. We're really concerned, and the government has responded. But that's not the end of that process. We, as myself as the author and Juanita as the victim, the person who's been affected by the harsh policies, we get a chance to reply to that on the 8th of April. So the Convention on the Status of Women, their priority topic was social protection, so that was one of the key reasons why we got over there this year. But it's so important, I think, because, we've got the federal election looming.
There you go. They want to turn it into an election issue. It is a media stunt in some regards. Let's have a look at this article, or this here from the Australian Council of Social Services. I just found it now, about the government's call for a response to this. So the Australian Council of Social Services today called on the Australian government to detail its response to the United Nations request for it to explain the decision to cut payments of over 80,000 single-parent families. The UN Special Rapporteur on extreme poverty and human rights and chair reporter of the working group on the issue of discrimination against women in law and practice, has written to the Australian government about the slashing of about $100 a week from the payments of single parents, which took effect on January 1. Okay, let's just look at this. They've sent people over there to create a incident or a request for information, and it's come back, and now they're using it. This organization is using that to, get publicity and to draw attention to the issue. I mean, regardless of how you see it, it's smart, it's effective, and this shows you how these organizations are politically, these activists, they know what they're doing, they know how to generate publicity, they know how to generate incidents, they know how to get bodies to cause the government to react. And that's impressive. And I think one of the takeaways from this is we can learn a lot, particularly if you want to be active in, activism and politics and pushing for fairness and equality with regards to opportunity, not outcome. That's what I'd be pushing for. We need to learn from how these people approach it. So the letter is, back to the article, the letter is in response to an urgent complaint, I think it was done a while ago, didn't we just hear, that Across and other welfare groups and human rights experts made last year, to the UN Special Rapporteur, following the federal government's refusal to follow the recommendations of its own Joint Parliamentary Committee on Human Rights to delay the cuts. We thank the UN Special Rapporteur for taking the issue on behalf of these single parents, 90% of whom are women and children. Well, why is this happening? Maybe we need to look at why this is happening. The strongly worded letter from the UN Special Rapporteur raises serious concerns that the cuts may be a violation of several rights included under the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. The ball is now in the Australian government's court to explain otherwise. There you go. So this includes the right to social security. That's a right? That's a right. Wow. I didn't know that. The right to an adequate standard of living. Is that a right? How are these rights? How are these rights? These are privileges that you need to work for. Social security isn't a right. Adequate standard of living, that's completely dependent on your circumstances. The prohibition of non-discrimination in the enjoyment of these rights, well, we already have that because we've got anti-discrimination legislation in Australia. And what I consider adequate to a standard of living has changed. As we've gotten more children, as we've had to tighten our belt, there's certain things you realize you can do without for a while if you need to. Hot water system's broken in summer. Well, you know what? We'll just boil the water for the kids' baths as we need to, and I'll just take cold showers for a couple of months so we don't go on the credit card, wait for that invoice to come in. You put up with it. Some people would balk at that. My mother is terrified. I keep threatening to her, we'll just turn off the hot water to save some gas for a while. She wants to kill me. So the letter states that there could be a violation of additional provisions in the ICESRC, such as the prohibition of retrogressive measures and the general limitation clause. Okay, so this is just all UN legal speak. So let's jump back to the piece here.
And we are a rich country, and we don't need to have families living in poverty, families contending every day with housing stress, with going without food.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's no doubt it's a tough issue, and both sides of politics have been cutting back these payments and make it harder for, changing the age of the child where the payments cuts out, for instance, once your youngest child turns 8. We've talked about the Parents Next legislation, return to work program that's currently the law. There's a Senate inquiry into that. But there is no doubt that the best form of welfare is a job, so long as parental support is available, some kind of support is available for the kids, and that's the problem with sole parents. But we do have a statement from the Attorney General's Office, Therese, saying that Australia's welfare measures are not discriminatory, and the aim is to increase the labour force participation rates of parents of school-aged children.
So there you go. They want to get you working. So let me know what you think. What do you reckon, guys? Is it more important for the children to have a stable life at home? But I mean, the thing is, where's the discussion about why we have so many single families? Why is it happening? It can't all just be terrible blokes. Guaranteed it can't all be that. That's not what it is. There have to be people making stupid decisions. But then again, in our own personal family experience, we've had people that have broken up and they still have to be civil to each other.
So what's the response from Therese and Juanita to this notion that, the best thing a government can do, which is what Parents Next is designed to do, is to try and help sole parents into education and work? Therese?
The aims are correct. The way they're going about it is wrong, and it's creating a false economy. So, it's actually women are seeking emergency relief. They're not actually doing their studies. The programs that are in place, including Parent Next.
So let's just quickly look at Parents Next, because I've never heard of it. A social support service for parents with children under 6 who get parenting payments. It will help you with your study and work goals. So what you need to know to be eligible: help you set study and work goals, set a participation plan with you, meet with you regularly, help you access services in the local community. Cool. Right. The problem with all of this type of stuff is, unless there is a drive from the individual person who wants to better themselves, an external thing coming and pushing on you and providing all this support isn't going to make that much difference. You may just jump through the loops. And, I think it's a great idea to get people who have, who probably not gone on any study or don't have work skills to get them so they could get a better job, but I don't know if it'll work. What happens if you don't take part? Miss appointments. See, here you go. How do you volunteer? So yeah, manage your money. So, okay. Well, we learned about something new. Good luck to them. I know the Salvation Army has, small schools that we've actually designed one where they have single mothers can come in, they can take their children, and they can finish their high school at the same time, which is a good idea. Or not even single mothers, just young mothers.
And cutting financial support actually makes people poorer and therefore more unlikely to be heading in the direction that everyone wants a family to head towards, which is standing on solid ground and being able to have financial security for their family.
So, Juanita, just finally to you, what changes would you hope to see out of this inquiry, out of out of your appearance at the UN?
I'd like to, on a personal level, I'd like the policy writers to have a look at the women in their lives who are enabling them to have their careers. And I'd like to see, obviously we'd like to see...
The policy writers to look at the women who are enabling them to have their careers. Okay? Yeah, that's probably women who've made smarter choices and who will work together with their partner to reach combined goals. And I can speak like that because my wife and I have gone through all of this. Rachel's career has had to take a back seat to motherhood, and that got harder for her, or it was a hard journey for her, but it was a realization over having one child, then another child, then another child, and then another child, going, okay, I'm more mother than architect. I'll do architecture part-time, around my other responsibilities, and help Florian do other things and work in the business, but it's a partnership. And that's because there's two people coming together. Doing it just by yourself, it's going to be, I can imagine how it'll be much harder. And in some ways, putting the expectations on a one-parent family to have, similar outcomes as a partnership is just not fair.
The age for availability of parenting payments single back up again to 16 or 18 because children certainly don't get any cheaper. We'd like to see...
When you're 16 or 18, you can get a job. You're virtually an adult there. You should be, having enough money to pay for all the fun things you want to do. I was working at Woolies, beeping stuff at that age and earning money. The one thing that isn't mentioned here and is, she's privileged in some regards, that she's not completely destitute, that our civilization cares enough about the children in these situations to provide sustenance, provide support, which, is a sign of a civilized society. But the difference is because it's been taken over by the state and not done by charities or religious organizations, where there you'd have to essentially repent. You'd have to go through a process of self-evaluation and improvement in order to gain access to it. Here you don't really. You don't. It's not the same. You know, you can just flutter through. And I'm not saying that everyone is not going to go through that process, but you can see, we looked at this parenting next thing, and they had a whole section of how you can just drop out. And what happens if you do it wrong. It's self-evident. I'd love to see the stats on the follow-through of it.
I'd like to see the rate raised, because incentivising people to go back to work by underpaying them negates the fact that that it actually costs money to go and look for jobs. It costs money to go out to work. And the poverty that you end up incurring while you're looking for work and living off virtually nothing still can take 6 to 12 months to recover from that when you do get into paid work. So it exacerbates it, and it just leads to this cycle. So I really think they need to be realistic. Stop filtering money into job access agencies and giving them commission for not putting people in jobs. And
that's an interesting point too. I mean, there was the Together Party that's critical of a lot of these NGOs, and I've got experience with friends who have, taken advantage of these agencies, and they just pretty much said, "Yeah, you'll never find a job. You're blind. I can't help you." You know, so yeah, I'm not confident in them. There has to be a better way. I reckon an app, kind of like an Uber app type of thing for work, but those all exist. And you need to have the initiative and the skills and the intelligence, really.
Give people money and their personal agency back.
Juanita McLaren, Therese Edwards, thank you very much for joining us from New York.
Thank you.
Juanita McLaren is a sole parent, single mother. She's just been telling the UN that Australia's treatment of single mothers breaches their human rights. Therese Edwards is Chief Executive of the National Council for Single Mothers and Their Children. That Senate inquiry into Parents Next is due to report at the end of the month. That amount of money that Juanita and her 3 sons is living on is, hard. Imagine that. You're listening to RM Breakfast. It's 13 minutes to 9.
Well, it isn't actually 13 minutes to 9 because I'm listening to this after. This is the National Council for Single Mothers and Their Children. I mean, there you go. Family payments, critical support, not a cost-saving measure. Well, guys, there's no discussion of the father. There's no discussion of the kids. What's best for the kids? Just throwing money at the single mother, is that the best? Why has she got 100% custody of the children? Maybe it's just her personal circumstance, but, we hear all the horror stories about the legal system, about how people are fighting, and it's a tough issue, guys. It really is. It is a tough issue. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you think this is fair? Do you think this has just been created to generate some publicity and an incident that can be used for political purposes coming up to an election? I am impressed, actually. I'm really impressed, and I think we need to learn from this. Maybe we need to... Men who are not getting access to their children need to look at this same strategy applied to the UN, saying that our legal system isn't by default 50-50 parental access in the court system, so that's discriminating against our human rights to have access to their children. There's an idea. So, guys, let me know what you think. I'd be interested to hear your opinions. I think this is just a particular case that they're putting forward, and they're trying to generate something for it. I don't know. You can throw all the money in the world at something, but if it isn't from the individual person, I don't know how successful it's going to be. Yeah. Anyway, take care. Please like, share, and subscribe. Ding the bell to see my daily updates, and I will see you all again tomorrow. Bye for now.